Well, hello again and welcome in. Wherever you are today and wherever you're listening from, I'm so happy to have you over to feast upon God's Word together. Get your plate ready today and take a seat. It's the 44, which is Matthew 4:4. Man cannot live on bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Let's eat. I'm your host, Jed Yancey. And I've got to officially admit that everyone has been right over all these years in telling me that there will come a time, Jed, when your body just won't be able to keep up with whatever you're trying to do. That it just doesn't work the same way it used to when you were younger. And I've found that out here recently, the very painful and hard way. So, it all started. I've got a brother-in-law down in Tampa named Ryan, and a few months ago, he was talking about how he's been running and he's training for a half marathon. So, man, no big deal, right? Let me jump in on some of that. So I told him, I'm in, man. I'd love to do that with you. I'd like to start training, and I'll do it too. So the last 2 months or so, I've been running, and what is so crazy is that always in my mind, I've considered myself to be decently athletic and in fairly good shape most of the time. My body, for the most part, has always kept up with anything I've tried to do or anything I've put it through. But for the first time in my life, I've truly felt the effects of not working out, not running, not engaging in physical activity on the regular or having done it for a while. And then all of a sudden jumping right out there again, like I'm in my 20s. Now, I should also insert that most of what I've been told is that it happens when you're 40. And some of y'all lied to me. I'm not quite there yet, but I'll have you know, like those first few runs I went on, I was so sore afterwards. Like I've had these pains in my calves and in my feet, and one morning it was so bad immediately after that I went and bought a bunch of ice and filled up a little bath and stuck my legs in there. Like in the last 2 months of running, I've felt pain in places I've never felt pain before. But let me tell you, I'm still all in. I'm running that race and we'll finish that race in March. It may not be very fast, but I'm going to do it. Now, real quick, back to the pain though, because while it's pretty easy to just blame it on my age, where I really want to go and what I want us to see, assuming you can relate to a story such as this, is that honestly, it has a lot less to do with my age and a whole lot more to do with my lack of activity over the last 2 years or so. Like my body has become so used to just an occasional walk with Megan, who's now pregnant, which means when we walk, we're not walking very fast, or maybe a few games of pickleball here and a few there, and not the actual push that it needs through lifting weights or running several miles. So now that I'm doing what I'm doing, while yes, it's hard to fight through the pain in my body some days, you know what the hardest part of all of it is? Like just waking up and doing it. I mean, living in Florida, you'd better believe I'm not running when the sun is out in July and August. That's not happening. The other hardest part is continuing to push farther and farther. Like it's not just waking up every day and getting up and running. In training for a marathon, it's like, can I push a little bit farther this time? Or go a little bit faster and just do it a little bit at a time. But you know what's so cool about continuing to embrace the push to go farther and farther and waking up early and just doing it? What I've started to notice in that, and this isn't going to surprise you, but now, after about 2 months, I'm a lot less sore. My pace is a whole lot faster than where I begin. It's getting easier and easier to wake up and to actually do it. And I also feel a lot less like I'm about to die when I get to the end of a long run. Why is that? Well, You guys know the answer to that. I mean, any big change is really hard. Like when you consider lifting weights, we would likely be able to say some of these same things apply there, or dieting, right? Like the list could go on and on. We could point to all these things, but doing it more and more and pushing yourself more and more, listen to this part, just a little bit at a time leaves you stronger, and likely when it comes to physical exercise with more energy than doing nothing. Now, I hope you caught that last part, which is going to be primarily our focus, just a little bit of at a time. Like in the beginning, I'll tell you, I bit off way more than I could handle. I went out there straight away, ran 3 miles, next day 3.5, next day 4, then 4.5, and then did 5 miles. And my body was like, Jed, you are killing me, man. And it did a whole lot more harm than good. I actually hurt myself. But with all that in mind, wouldn't we say that spiritually it's the same thing? Like if I asked you to describe an average American Christian's spiritual regimen or training, what would you say that consists of? Now, it may not be the case for you individually, of course, but what I'm asking for is an average Christian spiritual workout or training from week to week. You see, as I thought about that and wrote some thoughts down, I would say it looks a lot like maybe sometimes in my life of what I once was. Attend worship for 1 hour on a Sunday, maybe go to Bible study. And sometimes, even when I'm there, I'm not really there. I would pray, but it's like that 5, 10 second prayer before a meal, or prayer before I go to sleep, which usually leads to me falling asleep in the middle of it and waking up the next day and wondering if I even finished it, right? Reading and studying my Bible on my own, I mean, that's not really for me. That's the preacher's job to give me what I need and feed me in that, what, 20, 30 minute window on a Sunday. Oh, maybe, just maybe, you catch the 44 podcast every week too, right? So, like, let's add all this up. 168 hours in a week. And let's be generous and say between all of the things that would make up what I'm doing spiritually, training for the week, that we are in the neighborhood of, like, again, let's be generous, 3 hours. That's worship, that's a sermon, maybe a Bible study in there, praying, listening to a podcast. Honestly, I would hope that you agree that on average, that's pretty generous. But you know what that equates to on the weekly? 1.78% of each week's time. 1.78%, less than 2%. That's crazy, right? That would be the average, and that's being generous. Like, that's shocking. And yet, I want you to consider this: time spent in front of a screen or a phone. What's that percentage look like for us? Time spent eating. What does that look like for us? Like, we could go on for some more here, and I won't. I want you to know I'm not bringing this up in any kind of accusatory way. I just mean to bring it up in the context of reality. Like, in the same way we can get used to thinking, man, well, the occasional 30-minute walk, or the round or two of pickleball from here, there, or whatever day, like, that's going to do it. That's going to give me all I need physically. I'll be in the best shape of my life and ready to take on a marathon by walking once a week for 30 minutes or dinking back and forth over a net. I mean, does that level of intensity cut it? Does that amount of time cut it? And so, in the same way, am I in a spot where my level of spiritual fitness and what I'm doing now is actually preparing me for the race we all run, that is life? Probably not. So then what do we do about it? Well, the easy answer is you got to do something. But rather than take this in a direction of saying, well, go out there and bite off more than you can chew, like I did, let's just talk about something simple. Like, let's talk about what we all can do. And that is maybe more like 0.01% more today, and then 0.01% more tomorrow. And let's see where these small steps over a long period of time get us. And you know what's really cool to look at is part of the instruction Paul gives to Timothy in First Timothy chapter 4, where he says, train yourself to be godly. Physical training is good, but training in godliness or training for godliness is much better, promising benefits in this life and in the life to come. And so for your 44 today, I want to just live right here today. Like, let's just sit right here and eat on this verse. So, number one, the first part of this verse, train yourself, or some versions read discipline yourself. Like, the reality here is that you individually have to do it. You have to do the training. Like, as I go back to the marathon I'm due to run in March of next year, man, how sweet would it be if I could just bank on all of the training and all of the work and all of the sweat that my brother-in-law Ryan is putting in to help me run the race. That'd be awesome, right? And Ryan, if you're listening, like, keep going, bro. You're doing good and you're doing it for both of us. Like, you don't know this yet, but when that race starts, Ryan, I'm hopping on your back and you're going to run it for both of us. I mean, again, that would be awesome, but that's not the reality. Instead, Ryan's role in this, since we're doing it together, is to encourage me. And my role is to encourage him, which we do, to get ready, to train, to run, to share our progress, to look forward to sweating that thing out together. And so, I just wonder sometimes if maybe we aren't a little too critical of what I'm being given by others without first looking at what you are even giving or doing for yourself. Like, start right there. But just like me every morning when that alarm goes off, especially when I started, it was a fight that went down in my inner being. But if I'm going to truly train, I got to get up. I got to lace them up and I got to run. In the same way, spiritually, if you are that average 1.7% a week of spiritual training person, you aren't going to like it at first, probably. But watch what happens when you show some resolve in getting up and studying for yourself more than you're used to, just a little bit, listening and reading God's word a little more than you're used to, praying a little more and thinking about what you're going to say to God in prayer a little more than what you're used to. And again, not to go out there and say, oh, well, I read the whole book of Ezekiel or Revelation today. No, start small. There's a line from one of my favorite movies where a dad is training his boys to shoot and fire a weapon and how to shoot and how to aim. And he tells them in their training to aim small, miss small. I like that right here. Aim for something small. Read a psalm. Read one of Jesus' parables. We are often so intimidated by the length of the entire Bible, intimidated by the idea of where to start because our aim is so big, we miss really big. Instead, aim small, miss small, but you got to do it. You got to start somewhere. In the same way with my running, small successes over a long period of time will get me where I know I long to be, which is ready for a 13-mile run. But one more time, you, yourself, I, myself, we've got to start somewhere. And number two, the second part of this verse I want us to look at is train yourself to be godly, in godliness, or I like it this way, God likeness. Like, what are you even training yourself for? Well, you're training yourself to be godly or training yourself in godliness or godlikeness. And I can't help but to think that this right here, when you start, is where the soreness, the sore legs, the sore feet, the the pain in places you've never really felt before will start to show up. Because if I'm training myself in a way I really never have before, especially in God likeness, you're due to find out that even though this passage also says that godliness is profitable for all things in the life that is now as well as the one to come, that sometimes training yourself in godliness does not come without some soreness. It does not always make this life under the sun the most comfortable, or doesn't make you the richest, or doesn't bring you the most pleasure, or isn't always the easiest in life that is now. But what it does do is it makes it the best, and it makes it the most fulfilling that you can possibly make it in this life you live now and the one to come. Like, we know that to be true, right? I'm in the middle of some prep on a class in the book of Ecclesiastes, a book that speaks nothing of the life to come and speaks so much about the life we live on this earth. And if you know anything of Ecclesiastes, you know this phrase probably: vanity of vanity, all around is vanity. And this idea, well, really this truth, I would say, is that even when I found the very thing that does bring a smile to my face, or does bring me pleasure or joy, like living it up, or some great achievement maybe, or worldly wealth, or personal fame, or beauty, or wherever else you want to go, like the pleasure to be found in those things vanish, and all you're left with is misery. And again, if you know one of the other phrases used by Solomon in Ecclesiastes, you know this: it's like chasing the wind. You see, to train myself in God likeness means, yeah, I kind of need to know when I'm starting out, it's going to leave me sore in some places I've not really been sore before. Paul puts it this way in his second letter to Timothy: indeed, all who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. Sounds fun, right? Like, sign me up for that. Sound like something you're ready to take on? I mean, if so, expect to be sore in some areas, but just keep at it a little bit at a time, knowing that it will pay off. So finally, that's number three, the payoff part, right? The very thing you're training for or disciplining your body for in godliness will be profitable. Your effort will be profitable. It'll do you much good, not just in the life to come, but right here and right now. Like, I think as Americans, though, we're so used to hearing what is good for us, what can be profitable for us, and still not doing it anyways. Like, we're just used to and actually become enamored with the status quo rather than trying to exert ourselves even 0.01% more. Like, there was a guy I couldn't help but to think about. There was a guy that used to coach baseball for the Gators. And I was talking to him one time about the attitudes that I was dealing with when I was coaching that we had on our team, and how little effort some of our players on our team wanted to put in, and yet in turn they expected this great return on their investment, which was like very little. And I'll never forget him saying that they dealt with the same thing, even at the high level he was coaching at, and that kids nowadays would rather, and some even think, that they can go to the store and buy a bottle of sweat rather than put in the work to sweat themselves. I thought that was life changing for me. Like, that's the same thing we're talking about, right? I mean, who doesn't want to profit? Who doesn't want to live a good life right here and right now? And yet, like, as we look at what it takes, which isn't much, we say, nah, I'm good right here. I'll just show up on Sunday and listen to the sermon and then Jed's podcast on Friday morning. You see, that's no different than heading to the store and buying a bottle of sweat off the shelf rather than giving a little bit of exertion yourself, a little bit more than what you normally do to get that very thing we all desire, a good and fulfilling life here and in the one to come, too. I mean, just to take this a step farther, as we go back to physical exercise, like you can jump on Google and you can read about all the benefits of walking, like nothing crazy, right? Just walking 30 minutes a day. And yet, most, even though they know they really truly need to, they won't. Why? Well, I know the payoff would be great. I'd lose weight. I'd be in better health. My heart would be in better shape. My energy level would go up. But nah, I'm good right here. I'm fine with the status quo. And so here as we close, man, God has not asked me to read the entire Bible every day and bite off more than I can chew. He's not asked me to pray all day, every day, and engage in some long, lengthy, meaningless words prayer just to make it long kind of deal. But you know what is asked? Man, just keep trying to do better, be better, grow spiritually. And when it comes to spiritual training or spiritual development, training, since that's what we've been calling it, it shares so many similarities with physical development. And so, when considering both, what I guess we really need to leave with today is that growth only comes with exertion, only comes by some work on our end. I mean, maybe for instance, this podcast helps you some. Maybe it feeds you right, feeds you properly, but it's nothing more than a podcast. If all I'm willing to do with it is say, oh, cool, that was good, or that was terrible. Like, where is your effort? Where is my effort on the things that I'm even saying? Where is our exertion? You're 44 today. Man, I can't answer for what it should look like for you. But may we all be constantly striving to train ourselves for the purpose of godliness, knowing the profit that is to come in that. And what I think you'll find in taking it just a smidge at a time, little more here, little more exertion there, little more thought to my praying, little more study than what I'm used to, is that before long, those small increases will turn into big, large gains. And oh, what it will profit you, both right here and right now, and in the life to come. I thank you so much for listening today. I love you guys. And as always, until next week, you keep on eating.